Back to what I was saying here. In 2 Corinthians, you're going to notice that the tone that the Apostle Paul uses to write to the church at Corinth was a whole lot different than the tone that he used when he wrote the first letter to the Corinthians. That first letter was a letter of rebuke. Every chapter, he rebuked them for something. There was something that they weren't doing correctly. And so he went through every chapter, and there were several things that he dealt with. And, you know, that's kind of a hard letter to write. And you don't even really understand or know how somebody is going to receive that letter. Are they going to get angry with me? Are they going to write me off? Is going to be their response with that? And on top of all of that, when he wrote the letter, he gave it to Timothy and had Timothy hand deliver it with the instructions that he was to stay there and put the church in order. That was a very daunting task for Timothy, who was a young preacher at that time. But as a result of that letter and as a result of the ministry of Timothy there, the church made some major strides forward. And they completely turned around. And they were a church that people looked at as being almost a model church. But like any church, it could be a great church, but not everybody in the church is on board just yet. And that was the case here in 2 Corinthians. Not everybody was there. Some of them had good intentions, but they never really acted on those intentions. They may have even made some commitments, but they never really got around to fulfilling those commitments. And now, here in our text, the Apostle Paul is challenging them to finish what they started out to do. Look at verse 11 with me. Verse 11, now therefore, he says, perform the doing of it, that as there was a readiness to will, so there may be a performance also out of that which ye have. And we read this, and Paul recognizes, and you know, probably every pastor that has pastored his church for more than a year or so can look out at their people and say, you know, these are people that love the Lord. These are people that really want to do something for the Lord. And you've got some folks that, man, they're really, they're locked in. They're going to serve the Lord until the Lord comes back. That's their attitude. But not everybody is in the same place. And you can look at some that, you know, they have the attitude, if they had a theme hymn for their life, that hymn would, I shall not be moved. And that's how some people are. But the vast majority of folks in our churches are people that have a good heart, that really have good intentions. They'll start out and they'll make some commitments and it'll go good for a little while. And then something happens and then they kind of forget, they kind of quit, and they never get around to doing what they intended to do. And sincerely, that was their intention. They wanted to do those things. They just never got around to that. And so human behavior really hasn't changed that much. What the Apostle Paul is seeing in the church at Corinth, every pastor sees. And we still struggle with sin, and we still struggle with doing what is right. And it's going to be that way till Jesus comes. And so that brings me to this time of year. I don't know when it started. It wasn't important enough for me to go ahead and research how we begin to make resolutions on New Year's Day. But that's our tradition. That's what we do. New Year. We're going to do something a little bit different. Man, I want to be better this year than I was last year. Those are great goals. That's what, and we should be doing that. But we shouldn't wait till New Year's to make those commitments. You know, somebody, as a young Christian, somebody had made a statement to me. It was somewhere around New Year's, and just a friend of mine, we were in between services or something. And, we were talking about New Year's resolutions. And he made the statement to me. He says, well, you know what? You don't have to wait till New Year's to make some resolutions. You know, whenever you see something that needs changing, if you recognize that in October, you shouldn't wait till January to make that commitment. Make it when you see it. But it's our tradition that every New Year's, we analyze our lives. We analyze what we'd like to do different. We begin to make commitments. And, every year I highlight this. But there are companies that really profit off New Year's. Weight Watchers, man, this is their time of year right there. I mean, I get pop-ups, I get emails, I get all kinds of things this time of year. And they're targeting people. And, you can start out the new year with Weight Watchers. Peloton and Nautilus and these exercise machines, they're going to start going because, of course, everything's about weight. Planet Fitness is going to start sending you things in the mail. And companies recognize the human psyche that when the calendar turns over to a new year, people are evaluating and wanting to do some things to better themselves. And there's nothing wrong with resolutions. You ought to have some resolutions. You ought to make some commitments. But if we're going to make resolutions, we probably need to make some spiritual resolutions. I just stepping back from the notes just for a second, I automatically remember the beginning of this year. And I made some personal resolutions. And I wanted to spend more time in prayer. I kind of felt like, in this my own personal life here, my own personal situation, I looked last year and I said, you know what, I got so busy this past year, and it seemed like that I rushed through prayer every day. And so last year I said, you know what, I'm going to do my best not to do that this year. I'm just going to spend the necessary time in prayer. I'm going to make it a time of worship. I'm going to make it a time of fellowship. And that was my big resolution last year. And I kept that before me, and I'm thankful for that. You say, well, preacher, that seems like an easy thing. Spending more time in prayer. You've not seen my phone. I start getting text messages very early. I start getting phone calls very early. And by the way, just to help you there, wait till about, if it's not emergency, wait till about 9 o'clock before you text anybody. Okay, they may be old like Neil. and he may not get out of bed till 10. Now, of course, Neil's not that way. Neil has his own business. He's up before any of us probably. But, you know, I guard that time. And that was my New Year's commitment last year, my resolution. Honestly, my notifications stay off until 8 o'clock in the morning. You know, and I'll check my phone, you know, periodically, but there's not going to be that ding till after I'm done with the prayer closet. And I did that for a reason, because I didn't want to be distracted from that. That was my commitment. And God honored that, and God blessed that. And, you know, we ought to have some spiritual resolutions. You know, in most churches, our resolution is to read our Bible through in a year. Now, here at Berean, and by the way, we will give out the diplomas next week. I've already got them printed, but with everybody out, I'd rather most people be here when I give them. But here in our church, we read through the Bible in 90 days at the end of every year. And that's a good commitment to make. You ought to read more of your Bible. You ought to spend more time in the prayer closet. You know, every year, I purpose to give more to missions. And, I mean, I've done that every year. And, you know, God's honored that. God's blessed that. See, these are spiritual resolutions. I'm not worried about everything else. You know, I want a new truck this year, or something like. I want something tangible, something that is going to be, you know, eternal. And so we ought to make some of those commitments. I want to be more involved in the local church this year. I want to reach more people for Christ this year. I want to talk to more people this year. I want to give, I'm going to give you a good resolution for you. Go ahead and grab 100 outreach cards. And make it your goal to, I am going to personally invite 100 people to church this year. And do that. That's a good commitment to make. And so we make resolutions and we have good intentions, but you know 90% of all New Year's resolutions are broken before January's finished. And my dad used to say something that just kind of stuck with me. My dad always used to say to me as I was growing up, he'd remind me, son, good intentions does not equal good performance. And, you know, that carried with me. I mean, I'm 61 years old now. And my dad's been gone 30 years. And I've heard that so much growing up that it's always stuck with me. You know, intentions are great. But just because you have intentions doesn't mean that you're going to do it. Now, look at verse 11 with me here, and I'm going to hasten on here. Verse 11 again says, now therefore perform the doing of it, that as there was a readiness to will, so there may be performance also out of that which ye have. So verse 11 talks about there was a readiness to will. He's talking about you had good intentions. That's what you were planning on doing. You didn't quite get to performing it. So this year, perform the doing of it. There was a readiness to will, but now let's grow that into performance and do the best that we can in doing that. Each of us There's not a single person in this building today that is going to be truthful that would say that every time I've made a New Year's resolution, I've carried through with it all the time. And you know, some people, they make commitments that, just one-time things. I'm going to commit to going to church one time this year. And you're already here. Well, that's not really a commitment. You're not really stretching yourself there. But, when we make real commitments to God, we should be serious about that. And we should regularly be making commitments to God. Have you ever wondered why we fail in the things that we've committed? I want you to go with me to Hebrews chapter 12. Hebrews chapter 12, the first 3 verses. Wherefore, seeing we also are compassed about with so great a cloud of witnesses, let us lay aside every weight and the sin which doth so easily beset us, and let us run with patience the race that is set before us, looking unto Jesus, the author and finisher of our faith, who for the joy that was set before him endured the cross, despising the shame, and is set down on the right hand of the throne of God. For consider him that endured such contradiction of sinners against himself, lest ye be wearied and faint in your minds. So, we fail in our commitments is because we're carrying around a lot of weights. Verse number 1 not just talks about the cloud of witnesses, but it tells us, lay aside every weight and the sin which doth so easily beset us, and let us run with patience the race that is set before us. You know why we don't follow through with commitments? Do you know why that we never perform what we had every intention on doing? Is because we've allowed other things into our lives. Well, I'm going to commit to this, and I'm going to commit to this. We've got a lot of young families in our church. Unfortunately, all of them are sick, it seems like. But I have watched this take place over and over and over again in my ministry. We make a commitment. We'll even start out when we dedicate our child to the Lord. We'll bring them forth and to the altar, and the pastor will make the announcement, have a word of prayer, and this family, I'm trying to make up a generic name, and I first went with Smiths, and we got Smiths here. Then I went to Jones, and we got Joneses here. But we'll say the Smiths have brought their child before the church, and they want to dedicate him to the Lord. And so the pastor will have a word of prayer over them and announce to the church, and then the parents will say, we have come to dedicate our child to the Lord, and we have promised and made the commitment that we're going to keep them under the sound of the gospel. We're going to raise them in the nurture and the admonition of the Lord. That is our attention, and they're toddlers there. And then they start to grow up, and we start adding things in, and there's nothing wrong with adding things in, but eventually you get so many things you've added into life that you've got to do away with some things. So now your child is 7, 8 years old. Your child wants to play baseball. So we enroll them in baseball. And they want to be in the Scouts. And so we have them join the Scouts. And they want to be in the school play. So we do all of that. And then basketball season comes. And soccer season comes. And football season comes. And you've got your child in all of this. And you forgot all about the commitment that you made to the Lord about your child, and your kid is doing everything else but serving the Lord. And what you're doing is adding weights. You're adding different things into their life, and then when you begin to get overwhelmed and start to cut some things out, you know, the first thing that most parents cut out is the spiritual things. Because the other things, well, they seem to be more fun, and my kid may like those better, and really it's just a reflection of where you're at as a parent even. Well, when my child was 6 months old, that was important. And I made that commitment, but now it's not as important anymore, and it's not important in my life, and therefore it's not important in your child's life. And we fail in our commitments because we've added so many things in there. And it doesn't have to be a parent-child thing. Every one of us have things in our life. There's one thing I know about living in the 21st century. There's a lot of stuff to do. And we get busy real quick. And you begin to pare some things down. And you may be an adult. Is the first thing that you pare down is, I'm too busy to pray. I'm too busy to come to church. I'm too busy to live a spiritual life. I would rather do these things here. You know, you're in need of some commitments that are fresh and new. Because the commitments you made before became unimportant to you. So we let things hinder us from finishing what we started. And by the way, Satan knows when we make spiritual commitments, and he's going to do whatever he can to hinder us. The battle for our heart, battle for our commitments, is a very serious battle. And Satan takes it serious. He takes it more serious than we do. And he's going to do whatever he can to hinder us. And when we're not serious about our commitments, it's going to be a battle that we're going to lose every single time. Because the devil's going to push every button, bring every temptation. He is going to bring every opportunity. He is going to weigh us down and hinder us at every turn. But if we'll lay aside every weight, and we'll lay aside every sin that besets us and run with patience the race set before us, we'll finish the race to 2025. We'll finish it. Now, another reason we don't make good on our commitments is because we get weary and faint. We see that in verse 3. But if we consider Christ and what he endured for us, it should motivate us to keep pressing on. Galatians chapter 6, verse 9 says, and let us not be weary in well-doing, for in due season we shall reap if we faint not. So if we don't quit, we're going to be rewarded. We're going to reap some things. And this year should be a year we succeed in our commitments. There's no reason for us to fail. Just simple thinking here. You make a spiritual commitment, God is going to want to see you succeed in that spiritual commitment. And even if the devil begins to push back on that, greater is he that is in you than he that is in the world. So you need to keep your eyes on him. You need to keep your relationship close with him, and you are going to be successful in these things. And we all want success. Let me give you just a few things here and we'll be done. In order to be successful in the new year, I want you to turn to Philippians chapter number 3. Very simple. In fact, these verses of Scripture I've used several times in the 9 years that I've been here, several times. But Philippians chapter 3, verses 13 and 14. Apostle Paul says, "Brethren, I count not myself to have apprehended, but this one thing I do, forgetting those things which are behind and reaching forth unto those things which are before, I press toward the mark for the prize of the high calling of God in Christ Jesus." Now, the Apostle Paul has endured more as a Christian than any of us will ever endure in this building. But he was successful. He got to the end of life, and he says, "I've run my race, I've finished my course." And he boldly said that there's a crown of righteousness waiting for me. He was not apprehensive or fearful to come face to face with his Lord once he passed from this life, because he had run his race successfully. And throughout the New Testament, in the epistles that the Apostle Paul is writing, he gives us basically the same principle over and over again. And here in Philippians, he reminds us, first of all, forget our past. Forget our past. In verse 13, he says, forgetting those things which are behind. You know, it's a very simple concept. You cannot change what has happened before. Have you failed before? You know, when you make commitments, the very first thing the devil's going to do is say, "You've tried this before, and you failed before." Forget all of that. You can't change that. By the way, forget your successes. They're done. They're past. They're over with. You know, if you are resting on, well, I used to be this, or I used to do this for the Lord, you need to probably stop and listen to what you're saying. Because when we say, "I used to," that tells everybody that, well, it's something I did in the past, but I'm not doing now. Whether you've been successful in the past, whether you've failed in the past, Paul reminds us to forget those things. And in our context, I want you to understand that last year is gone. At least it will be on Wednesday. 2024 is gone. You can't change the past, so don't let it discourage you. So many people are defeated before they even get out of the starting gate, because Satan brings to their mind that you've tried this before, you've only got a little bit down the road and you've failed. You know, if you allow past failures to shape you, you'll never taste success. You never will. I study people, not just in the present, but, you know, I like history. And when I see somebody successful, I want to look and see what made them successful. And you know, doesn't matter who I read about, I have never, ever read about somebody that was successful that never experienced failure. Never. We think somebody successful is somebody that woke up one day, got this great idea, and everything was successful all the way for the rest of their life. That doesn't happen. That's never happened. Some of the greatest business minds in the world went from being bankrupt. I don't know who the richest man in history was. You can argue that all day you want to, but John D. Rockefeller was a pretty rich fella. But do you know, when he started out in that oil business, he barely was eating. You know, I'm going to Florida here in a couple of weeks, and Mom's got a condominium outside of Disney World, and so everything around there is centers around Disney. And, you know, Walt Disney went bankrupt before he even got successful. Walt Disney was finding meals in the trash can. Went bankrupt in Illinois before he moved out to California. And he's a fascinating read, his life. Nobody ever thought he was going to make it. Failure after failure after failure after failure. And then all of a sudden something happened. And that goes on in our lives as well. Don't ever let failure trip you up. Do you remember when you started riding a bike? You know, if you quit the first time that you fell down, you'd never learn how to ride a bike. You know, as a parent, and it seems like such a long time ago, and it was now. But I remember Jesse and Becky trying to teach them to ride the bike. And you do all of these things, you know. You give them the training wheels, and, you know, and they're good on the training wheels. But as soon as you take the training wheels off, see, now you're in a different world. And so what you do as a parent is you grab the back of the seat and pedal, 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 and you run after them. And you say, I'm going to let go here, just keep pedaling. And you let go and they stop pedaling and they fall. Skin their knee, or maybe they're just scared because they fell. And, you know, they're like, I'll never do this. But then they see all of their friends riding a bike. They say, you know what? They can ride it, I can ride it. So they'll get back on that bike, and you'll get back behind that seat again. You'll go through this over and over and over again until you get it. You may fail the first time. You may fail the second time. You may fail 10 times. But if it's worth doing, keep trying. Forget your past failures. Instead, reach for those things ahead. Instead of remembering what you can't change, reach forth into those things that are before you. And when it comes to our commitment in spiritual things, our commitments to God, keep your commitment before your eyes every single day. And you reach for that goal every single day. You remember, this is the commitment that I made. This is what I want to do. And so I'm going to do that it's going to be a daily battle. And today, you're probably thinking, I've already decided on what my commitment to the Lord is going to be. And thank God for that. But don't ever let your commitment become old news. Because old news becomes forgotten news. And if you forget, you won't perform. You stick notes on your refrigerator, on your dashboard. Personally, during my prayer time this year, I was already in the prayer closet. But before I even started, before I opened up my iPad to get my prayer list out and about, I already know as soon as that comes up, hey, I've made the commitment to make this more meaningful. So every day that's before me, don't let your commitment become overwhelming. Instead of it being a yearly goal, make it a daily one. Just some advice here. It's like when we do the 90-day Bible reading challenge. If you look at this as one great big challenge, and you start out, and what a great illustration. I never even considered this. But, we start out, and by the way, 32 people this year completed the Bible reading challenge in 90 days. We've got that progress board that comes up every service. And, that first month, you got all kind of people on that list, and everybody's progressing. And then, you're excited about it for a week, you're excited about it for a month. And then you miss a day, you miss a week. And you think, it's so overwhelming, I'm never going to do it. Well, because you didn't make it a daily goal. Every year, we'll have somebody that will get through Genesis, get through Exodus, but at the end of the challenge, they're still in Leviticus. And the chart comes up, and of course all the names are anonymous on there. You look at those people that, you've been in Leviticus for a month. And you're looking at it as, oh man, I've got to make up a month's worth of reading. And that becomes overwhelming for you, so you just quit. Look at your commitment not as a yearly commitment, but as a daily commitment. I'm going to do this every single day. What are you doing? You're reaching out towards that goal. Those things that are in front of you, yes, I'm making progress. Then the third thing that Paul tells the Philippians here is to press towards the mark. Verse 14, I press toward the mark for the prize of the high calling of God in Christ Jesus. Pressing towards the mark refers to perseverance. To press gives the idea that you're meeting some resistance, but in spite of the resistance, you're still making progress. And by the way, you're going to face resistance. It doesn't matter what spiritual goal that you make for yourself. Understand, you are going to face resistance in this. So don't think and don't get into this with the assumption it's going to be smooth sailing all year round. It's not. And it's not going to be as simple as forgetting those things behind and reaching forth to those things before us. It requires us pressing toward the mark. Expect resistance from your flesh. Expect resistance from the devil. Expect resistance from the world. And expect it now and make up your mind that you're going to press towards that mark no matter what comes your way. Now, it really sounds simple, but don't let it fool you. Make your spiritual commitments and prepare for battle, because it's coming and it's going to be an everyday battle. So, what kind of commitments are you going to make this year? In a few seconds, we're going to have an invitation time where we can come to the altar and just speak to the Lord and make those commitments if you want to today. And I want to challenge you to make full commitment at this time. And when you've made your commitment, write it down and keep it in front of you each day and persevere. Press towards that mark. Get to the end of this year and realize what God let you do this year. You know, I've learned this. You let it go through. You're successful one time. You can't wait for the second time. You're successful the second time. Then the third time comes and the fourth time comes. And it benefits us. Father, we do love you. Thank you for the opportunity that we have. Lord, you've been good to us. And Lord, personally, Lord, just personally, Lord, I want this year coming up to be the most successful spiritual year that I've ever had. Lord, I want to be closer to you.